SCHD has just announced their first dividend of 2025, and it marks another massive increase as part of this exciting dividend stock. They also made some pretty significant changes to the holdings of this fund, which is all a part of what we'll be diving into today. But first, let's kick things off here with their dividend. So if you scroll down directly on the SCHD webpage, you can find all of their distributions, including the most recent. So we can see that today, March 26, 2025, this marks the ex-dividend date, which means that any shares held today will be qualified for that dividend. Now, more importantly, that dividend value is 0.2488, so about 24 cents per share for this quarter, and this will be paid out on March 31st, 2025. Now, if you wanted to calculate your SCHD dividend, all you would have to do is multiply your shares owned by the dividend distribution per share. So for example, I own 525 shares of SCHD, and with the dividend of about 0.2488, this comes out to $130.62. And for $130, I should be able to purchase around 4 more shares. Now, jumping back over to the dividend payouts, you may notice something when looking at the dividends paid out, especially when comparing the Q1 2025 and Q4 2024 dividends to all of the previous. So you may be wondering, why are these dividends so much higher than the most recent two? And that's because SCHD recently did a 3-to-1 stock split in late 2024. Now, if you are new to stock splits, or you're new to SCHD, I'll show you what that means for the fund if you were holding it during this time. So for example, let's say we owned 10 shares at a price of $90 per share before it split. This would work out to have a value around $900. Now in the split, which they said would be 3-to-1, this means your 10 shares would get multiplied by 3, becoming 30, and your $90 per share would get divided by 3, which comes out to $30 per share. And when you multiply your average share price times your new shares, this works out to 900. So the same amount before the split. So nothing changes about the value that you have invested into the stock, just the number of shares and the price that it's trading at. But this also has some impacts on the dividend. As you saw there, the dividends shown were a lot higher than the recent two. And if we jump over to this spreadsheet here, I have been tracking all of SCHD's dividends for years, and I have adjusted them all for their post-split values. So all this would mean is very similar to the share price. We take that old dividend paid out, divided by 3, and that is the new price relative to the current value. Now, another thing that a lot of investors like about SCHD is this consistent growth in the dividends. And I like to compare the Q1 2025 to the Q1 2024 and monitor this year-over-year, quarter-over-quarter growth. And in doing that, I can see that this 2025 dividend marks almost 22% increase compared to 2024 Q1. And this is pretty significant. SCHD is known for raising these dividends at a very high rate, and to see them do it countless times over and over is very encouraging as an investor in SCHD. If we jump over to Seeking Alpha, we can see exactly why many investors are interested in SCHD, and that is because of their 10-year dividend growth rate around 8.3% and the 5-year dividend growth rate around 5.5%. So as a long-term investor like myself, it's very encouraging to see that SCHD is still making increases in their dividend quarter over quarter and year over year. Now, SCHD has also made some pretty significant changes to the holdings of this fund. That is because the Dow Jones US Dividend 100 Index has made some changes. And this is the index, if you didn't know, that SCHD is tracking. So the Dow Jones US Dividend 100 Index, it screens dividend stocks based on dividend consistency, liquidity, size, and the dividend yield. Now, they have also made some pretty significant changes to the fund's holdings, and we can find a lot of these details over on Seeking Alpha. Now, for the additions, there were 20 new stocks added to the fund. So here they are. Each fund is listed in terms of company name, the ticker in brackets, then the relative weighting added to the fund, and lastly, the sector that they're in. So some pretty significant names being added to the fund here. A lot of the positions are in energy with COP and SLB, as well as several new positions in consumer staples with Target and General Mills. Feel free to pause here if you want to dive a little deeper into these holdings, but I also want to show you some of the stocks that were removed from this fund. And that is a total of 17 stocks that were removed, including some huge names like Pfizer, BlackRock, US Bancorp, M&T Bank, and many more. And these updates to the fund are one of the many reasons investors have so much support for SCHD, and that is because they make these changes on a regular basis to maintain their objectives of dividend growth and stability. So that covers most of the topics for today's video, and if you did find it helpful, be sure to like and subscribe.